Welcome back to Faith and Logic, episode 10. The big 10. 10 episodes in. Today's episode, as you can see from the thumbnail, is all about forgiveness. Quick intro, I guess. This is an episode that is pretty important for me personally, and it's one that I wanted to share with you guys quite a lot since I started this journey. Or we started this journey, should I say. Yeah, I guess forgiveness is quite an important thing in life, right? I think we can acknowledge that, which is why we're talking about this today. And as always, we'll start with the what. And the what is quite diverse because, there's three terms that we're going to get into today. And obviously, we're talking about the forgive, okay? Forgiveness and forgiving. And those are the three ways in which we'll approach the topic of, well, forgiveness in general, or forgiving, or the choice to forgive. But we'll get into that a bit more down the line. So we'll start with the meaning, the what. So to forgive, what is to forgive? If we're going to talk about it in that way to start. And most neatly described as this: stop feeling angry or resentful towards someone for an offense, a flaw, or a mistake they have made, right? And in addition to that, you could say it, I guess, with a bit more personality, which is to no longer feel angry about or wish to punish someone for that offense, flaw, or mistake that you've incurred through them. And I guess that is quite, forgiveness is a very difficult thing, and it's why I've broken it down into these three terms in terms of how we're going to approach it. So to forgive someone is obviously a choice. It's a choice that we have to make for ourselves. And I think that's often a difficult choice. It's one that I think naturally as human beings we want to make. We want to make the choice to forgive because in a lot of ways we know that's the best way to deal with something. The best way to deal with being wronged is to forgive the wrongdoer and then move on with your life, because that's going to give you an element of freedom, peace of mind. But I think a lot of times our pride and sometimes our ego and sometimes our just feeling of self-worth has been trodden on, right? So we don't feel like we want to forgive them. In fact, we want maybe revenge, or we want things to be made equal, or we want to be made whole. But a lot of times in life that's not going to happen, right? And a lot of times, when it comes to getting equal, getting even, being made whole, it might have, well, always almost some seems to have, especially when you're a wronged party, an element of revenge or vengeance about it, which I think we understand as human beings is never something which is gonna serve us very well in the long term. You're gonna have to, as the wronged party, you're gonna have to give up your righteousness in that situation in order to get the revenge, and that means that the karma will now follow you. You're going to put yourself in the same position that person was in when they wronged you. And ultimately, as I said, it's a righteous thing to be when you're the wrong party because you have not done anything to anyone. Okay? Might not be true for earlier down the line or even later down the line. But in that moment, when we're talking about you and this other individual who's done something to you, you have the righteous position. You're the one who tried to be forthright, tried to be good, just, and honest, and ultimately um it didn't pan out that way, or it didn't go well for you because the other person is, it's a human being. They're flawed at the end of the day, but maybe they had nefarious intentions towards you, and that led to you, taking a loss in some way or other. And it's quite broad when we talk about being, but ultimately, as I said, it's that feeling of anger and resentment that we have for that person. you know let's give it a bit more context. I guess you could say that a lot of times you're talking about maybe some money that's gone missing, or a partner who's cheated on you, or a friend who's supposed to have your back and he didn't have your back in a certain way, or a parent who was supposed to show a duty of care for you and maybe they slipped up in certain ways. And sometimes that resentment is long standing, right? It's not based on one particular act. That resentment can sometimes be based on years of mistreatment at the hands of someone else. And a lot of times I think we feel worse about it because it seems to be like a deliberate nature. And what I would say is most of the things that people do to you, or the resulting feeling you get from them, it's never really done with deliberacy. I don't think there's a lot of people today who deliberately want to cause harm or hurt the feelings of others. But ultimately, our human nature, our desire for something else, or our desire to be somewhere else, or to do something else, or to have something, possess something, that is what drives us to do things which ultimately hurt others, right? And again, you can align that with the pride and the ego as well. Those are the things that cause us to cause harm to other people. And I think in order to forgive, just at the top of this conversation, it's very important to understand that we're all flawed. You can't have yourself or feel that you're better than the person who's on the other end of this side, the wrongdoer in this instance. You can't feel better than them, because I think that position of superiority is what will lead you down the wrong path. Okay, you have to accept that, okay, I'm human, they're flawed. Maybe they're more flawed than me, but ultimately we're of the same essence, and they were not able to combat the thing which caused them to do me harm. Okay, because psychologically there's an imbalance. There's something that they're dealing with that I'm not having to deal with, that makes them do things to people that aren't necessarily nice. And again, we have to kind of give credence to that and allow for that to happen. It's always best when these things happen and you learn from the situation, and you're like, okay, I won't put myself back in a position like that again, because, I know that if I'm around this type of person, or if I let this type of thing happen to me, I know what the results are. But ultimately, it's about learning, it's about growing, and it's about getting better, I guess, essentially. And your desire to get better should be, it can be very it should advocate for your desire to forgive. Okay, if you want to be better, you should also want to forgive, because forgiveness allows you to let go. And I guess we'll go on to this next point, right? So so we talked about forgive, the choice to forgive, which is again a very important choice that we have to make. We cannot be forced to do it, and that's why it's so important. No one can make you forgive someone, right? You can be made to do a lot of things. You can be compelled to do a lot of things in the interest of others, in the interest of yourself. But there's a lot going on that just won't let you forgive. That is a choice that you have to make, and you're in complete control of that. It's one of the few things that we have ultimate control over when it comes to our interpersonal relationships and conversations and goings on daily with other people. Is if we're wronged, right? We can choose to hold on to that, or we can choose to forgive the person for it and essentially free them and free ourselves from the instance of wrongdoing in that nature. So forgiveness, okay, when you talk about it in that terms, is definitely a gift. It's something you give to someone else. And I would say, as much as it's something you give to someone else, it's more something you give to yourself. You are relinquishing the burden of the scenario, the situation, the act, the loss. You're letting go of that thing. You're forgiving it. You're giving forgiveness to someone else, which is ultimately freeing yourself of the situation. Once you forgive someone for something they've done to you, it's very strange. It's very hard to quantify, but there is a lightness that comes with forgiveness that is, like I said, it's very hard to really put a finger on how it works. When you've truly forgiven something for someone, especially when it's something that really was sitting on your chest, it was weighing you down, and you may not even known that it was having such an effect on you. But the reality is, once you chose to forgive that person, there is a levity to that moment which is quite profound, and it gives you a weightlessness which is, sometimes you didn't know you were drowning in it. But once you really made that choice to forgive, that gift that you're going to give to yourself, which is letting go, you're free. It's almost like breaking a chain. You're unlinking yourself to something which was you were tied to for maybe months, days, weeks, hours, years, whatever the amount of time was that you were tied to this thing. It was weighing you down. You were carrying that around. That is baggage that you're going to have to move through life with, because it's going to affect your relationships. It's going to affect how you deal with other people. And again, it's not to say that you shouldn't be changed by certain things, because you have to learn from the acts of others and the acts of yourself, right? But ultimately, if you don't forgive someone for the wrongdoing, sometimes you are going to sometimes take the bigger loss down the line, because it's going to marginalize your life in a way that you don't want to be marginalized. You want to be free. You want to be able to move through the world unbound by past experiences and without the feeling that something is going to go wrong. That pessimism that comes with the lack of forgiveness is quite stark, and it can weigh you down significantly, as we're saying. And that goes on to the final meaning that we were talking about, which is, or the final word we were talking about, should I say, which is forgiving, which is the act of doing it, the act of forgiving, of letting go and accepting what was so that what will be can flourish. You have to really accept whatever happened in that scenario. And like I said, the best way to accept mistreatment is to acknowledge the human condition within that. That person has something in them which they don't have control over, and that is why they treated you badly. That's why they didn't do the right thing by you, and that's not your fault. And to some degree, it's not even their fault. And when you can let go of that, when you can understand how flawed we are as human beings, it makes it much easier to go through the act of forgiving someone, because you're not holding them to a standard which you know they were never going to be able to live up to anyway. Okay. And it's not to say you should, again, have this kind of negative view of humans, of life, because you always hope for the best, right? You should always want to have an optimistic, altruistic way of looking at other individuals, hoping that they can meet and attain a higher level of being. But we know we're going to fall short because none of us are perfect, and we have to accept that up front. Um, and I think the most poignant thing about it, which I kind of said there, is about that gift that you give to yourself, right? When it comes to forgiveness, is it's very much of self. Okay, your forgiveness is entirely down to you. It's entirely controlled by you. It's your choice. It's your act, and it's your gift. It's all about you. The other individual really doesn't come into it that much. Um, even when you're even when you're one doing the forgiving, you really have to look at it as a gift you're giving to yourself. It's not really about the other individual. It's about how much do you want to get past what happened. And if you really want to get past it, the only thing you can do is forgive. Okay. That is going to be your gift to yourself, your freedom, your liberty, which you're going to give back to yourself, that unchains you and allows you to move forward. The recipient, true forgiveness does not require the recipient of it to do anything. Okay. And that is really what's difficult about it. That's why forgiveness is such a hard thing to give out. Because one, okay, like I said at the top, whatever happened now, you feel like you've been hard done by. Like there's an imbalance there. It's not equal anymore. That person took something from you, essentially, which is all that we're really talking about. In any essence, no matter what the act is, essentially this person is taking something from you, and you're feeling like you're missing something because of what they've taken from you. And in most cases, whatever it is, okay, if it's money and they can pay it back to you, great. But they still took it, right? In the first place. They still stole from you. And the act of physically stealing is quite important in this regard, because if someone steals from you once, they went through, maybe they took it out of your bank, or they took it out of the drawer in your room, or they took it off the side where you left it, right? They took something from you. They still did that. And it still says a lot about who they are and what they're willing to do. And whilst we can't judge, we cannot then go about retrusting them, depending on what your relationship is, and what type of work that person has done to kind of regain your trust. We cannot immediately just hand our trust back over to this person because they already stole. Fair enough, you gave me the money back. What it's really about is forgiving the condition of them which allowed them to steal in the first place. Whatever it was where they felt that was their only option, that's what you're forgiving right there. You're forgiving them for having that thing within them. And again, like I said, it's very hard to do. It's not something which you're going to be able to do with ease. But as I said before, it's the human condition and the flawed nature of it, which you're really going to have to get around and understand, and fundamentally just realize for yourself, kind of seeing yourself in them, because we all have our flaws. That's going to allow you to forgive. And as I said, kind of on that point, the recipient cannot do anything in that regard. They cannot give you anything really to make you forgive them. You are going to have to decide for yourself, truly, because sometimes they can make you whole and you still don't feel like forgiving them. And that is a very vengeful state to be in, because even though they've tried to make amends, they've tried to, create recompense, you still want something out of them. You still feel like, no, I need more than that. And as I said, that's a very vengeful state to be in. That state can be quite damaging to you and to people around you if you harbor that type of resentment, which is so strong that even when the person who wronged you has tried hard to make it right, you still just cannot forgive them. That is gonna weigh more on you than it is on them going forward. They can move forward kind of with the knowledge that, okay, I tried. In this instance, Elliot doesn't want to forgive me. He still feels like, he wants some revenge, or he wants some get back, or he hasn't been made whole in this situation. I can't do any more than I did. And the reality is, at that point, what really needs to happen for Elliot to get past it is he needs to understand that I'm flawed just like he is, and I made a mistake. And by forgiving me, he's going to set himself free, because that vengeful revenge feeling it doesn't do you any good. It really has no value to you at all. What's going to be valuable is you understanding why that thing happened to you and being able to move forward through that, as I said, that understanding your behavior in that scenario, understanding the behavior of the other person. Did I do something? And this is what I always do. And we'll have a quick caveat here while we move through chapters, right? Whenever something like this happens to me, or whenever a scenario is created where I feel wronged, or I feel like something is unfair, or I feel like I lost out, I start with me first, okay? And this is something that humans don't really do, because we do tend to see ourselves as the victim. And sometimes we are, right? Sometimes people do treat us unfairly, and, things don't go the way maybe the natural order, or our feeling of the natural order says they should. But the reality is, you're always going to be best served with starting at home, okay? Start at home. So something bad happened. I didn't like it. I feel like I've been hard done by. Okay, cool. First things first. Did I do anything wrong to create the situation? Or did I behave in a way that could have created a situation? Or is there anything I could have done differently to avoid this situation? Or, you really have to go through all the variables of yourself first. Okay, how did you create a scenario where this thing could come about? Okay. Once you've done that, that's when you can start to deal with what the other person did. Was it unfair? Should they have done differently? What made them do what they did? But you really have to start at home when it comes to getting around situations like this, because there's an element of trauma there which you're going to have to deal with. And the reality is, starting at home is going to make it easier. Once you've eliminated yourself from the equation, and maybe you can say, all right, well, I didn't do anything. Now you can really process what the other person did in a forthright manner. But you have to start at home first, because oftentimes, as I said, we want to be the victim, and we are the victim sometimes, but it's always better when you eliminate yourself from the equation first, and then allow the remaining parts to be solved, to put that puzzle together once you've taken yourself out. So as you said, the reality is, forgiveness is freeing. It's difficult because it requires an element of compassion for the person who did you wrong. And that, again, we're asking for a lot right there, right? You having compassion for someone who did something bad to you enough to say that you forgive them, that's not easy. That takes a lot of strength. It's a real test of strength and character. And many of us fail to do this, right? Many of us fail to get out of that state of resentment and anger, because we can't forgive, because it requires too much of our spirit. Like, how am I supposed to forgive this person? They did the worst thing in the world to me. Something unimaginable. I don't want to create scenarios, because, there's always something worse, right? You might have had something bad happen to you. Someone's always had something worse happen to them. That's the reality of it as well. And then a lot of times, the person who's had something worse happen to them has been able to forgive the person who done it, which, again, it required strength. It required great compassion. It's a real test of character to see if you can be strong enough to forgive, right? I think as well, and this is another good point, is that we sometimes look at forgiveness as weak. It's almost like you are too weak to hold on to the vengeful feeling you had. But in actuality, it's quite the opposite. And I think we really know that, right? The real strength is in forgiveness. Revenge is quite a weak thing to go after. It's the immediate emotion. Someone hit me, I want to hit back. Okay, that's instantaneous. But pausing and thinking and applying a level of maturity that, again, is quite hard to to do in certain scenarios, especially when we're talking about, certain types of wrongdoings. It requires a lot of strength. It's a very powerful thing to do, and you put yourself in an ether which is very hard to get to as a human being when you're able to show that level of strength and humility within yourself that will allow you to give someone that forgiveness. But more so, as we're saying here, right, it's really about us giving to ourselves. It's about us allowing ourselves to let go of what was done to us so that we can move forward, because invariably your forgiveness may have no effect on the person you give it to, and absolving yourself of, excuse me, of the guilt sometimes that you're feeling for having been on the receiving end of whatever this act or situation was, is what's going to really allow you to truly let go. You have to absolve yourself of like this element of like, nah, how did I let this happen to me? Okay, your pride and ego is like, no, we were never supposed to go through that. I'm worth more than what this person did to me. Okay, but when you can absolve yourself of that kind of almost like self guilt, which is applied by your ego when something is done to you, you're then, as I said, you're going to gain a new level of, almost a new level of spirituality and soul by saying to yourself, no, I won't allow the situation, the anger, the resentment, the need for revenge to have control over me, and to now guide the way I act with other people and how I act towards myself as well. Okay. You need to be open. You need to be free. You need to be able to enjoy your life to the fullest. And vengeance is just deep rooted. It's corrosive. It really beds in quite deep. And as I said, it will largely dictate how you move forward in other scenarios if you're holding on to something else that happened previously. Until you truly forgive someone, particularly when the act has had a profound effect on you, as you're saying, you will not be able to move forward with your own life in a properly true sense of the manner, right? You're going to be held there in some way or another. And it might not come up all the time, but every now and then it's going to rear its head. You're going to feel that feeling of like, this is like, but so and so, I was in this position with so and so before, right? And the reality is they didn't do me right. So, okay, to avoid getting hurt, I'm just going to go this way and do that instead. But again, that's going to minimize your potential outcomes, maybe some positive things, some great things, some great people you're not going to be able to experience and have access to because you're still holding on to the resentment, the anger, and the revenge that you want for something that happened years ago. And that point is mostly, I've written it down here. I'll read it out just so that it's clear what we're trying to say as far as moving forward. The next time something of a similar nature happens, you will be transported to that place of resentment and hard feeling. All of the other acts or times you were wronged will compound the true weight of this burden, right? And again, that's not something that we can easily get around. And which is why I say that forgiveness is really a gift you're giving to yourself. It's not something you're giving to someone else. You're allowing yourself to move forward. Okay, that person, if they're a person of any standing, they're gonna have to live with regret and contrition about how they treated you, and that is gonna have way more of a profound effect on them going forward than it is on you, right? That's a much bigger burden to bear in terms of life, because their nature is not going to allow them to quickly get around that thing. They're going to have to spend years working on that behavior, channeling different energy to see if, are they really the person who did that thing to you, or can they really be better? And they're probably going to fall down one or two more times because in actuality, although they want to be that person, their life has not met the road yet where they can truly go down that path. It just hasn't worked out for them. And they're going to have to find a way to, kind of get around it so that, there isn't that same thing, because they're going to kill their relationships, right? They're going to have other scenarios where good people are going to come around, and because they just haven't gotten over that thing that they've done or gotten around that behavior they have, sorry, they're going to do the same thing again to someone else. It's really about the human nature, their human nature in this instance, and not your own. Um, And we're closing out here, right? As we always do, we get towards the end. So I want to deal with the kind of softer, more delicate bits of forgiveness and the act of forgiving, and how we're gonna be able to do it most neatly, as I said, for ourselves, right? So what's important when it comes to forgiveness? Well, it doesn't have to be a scenario where you call up that person who did you wrong and you're like, man, like I was feeling bad about, what happened between us, and I really want to let go of it, so just wanted to let you know I forgive you. Like, you don't have to do all of that. I think it's good if you can, because communicating it to the person will have value. But in reality, we're talking about ourselves here. How are we going to move forward? And what I would say is, you do not always need to communicate your forgiveness. Although that's the best way to do it, you do not have to always communicate it to the person. But what you do need to do is, you really need to actualize it and realize it for yourself. And that sometimes means opening yourself up to that situation which you were wronged in before. Can you go back into that environment, space, place, or type of person or relationship and truly be there with your full true self, not holding on to resentment and anger about what someone else did to you previously? So that's going to be your test of how much you're really truly forgiving the person for what happened. But again, the value of it is for us, and you do not have to necessarily communicate it to the person. I want to say also, it is best if you can. If you can meet with that person face to face and say, look, I didn't feel good about this thing you did, but I want you to know that I forgive you for that, and I don't hold any resentment or ill will to you, because well, I mean, maybe you don't need to give them a reason, but the reason we don't hold the ill will is because we recognize it's a human condition, right? If you can do that, then again, you are going to be even better, sir, because now you can confront that feeling also. You can look at the individual who you had that resentment and anger towards, and your energy is going to be at a level where you are not triggered by this person any longer, because you truly have let go. You truly let go of that thing. You've truly forgiven them for what they may have done to you, right? So simply allowing your spirit to truly hold no animosity, bad feeling, or need for revenge will also, whilst also accepting the human condition, is enough to free yourself from the grip. Okay, so that is what we really need to do here. Okay, so the spirit is to truly hold no animosity, bad feeling, or need for revenge. Okay, and that is how you're going to free yourself from the grip that this thing, this act, this maybe it's a mild or maybe it's a big trauma, has had on you. That is how you're going to let go of it. Okay, and that is the those are the steps which are required for forgiveness. It's first looking inwards, then understanding who the other person is, and then just letting go of it. Letting go of it and understanding that there's better days going to be ahead. And you were going to maybe block or ruin some of those better days if you stay in the past. Okay, we cannot change what happened previously. Accept it, move forward. Forgiveness creates a new level of freedom, greater tolerance, and an ability to be unbothered by the acts of others. So once you get to this state, right, where you have been able to forgive someone, if you've really done the work, the process has gone through the processes that are needed to forgive, what's gonna happen next is your tolerance, as I said, and your judgment of others is then going to change shape a little bit, because you're going to understand that these are just human beings. And whilst my good nature can put me in positions where someone might take advantage of me, I'm and it's not about positioning, but I can guarantee you are vibrating, moving at a higher frequency than these individuals, because you are not someone who would look to do someone in the way that someone would do you, right? But at the same time, you acknowledge where that behavior comes from, where those acts and traits come from. As you said, it's a human condition, and you can then tolerate it. You can then be unbothered by it, and that is a truly freeing thing. That's beyond the element of just forgiveness. Now, when you see something in the wild, or you experience something, or someone tries to do something to you, you're really not fazed by it, because you recognize it. You're like, oh, this, I know why you feel that way, or you're acting that way, or you're doing that thing. But I really can't hold it against you, because you're just another human being like me, and I know how difficult it is to get over the things that have a grip on us. So these things kind of just float off your back once you get to that stage, and it's a very, very beautiful place to be in. I think it's an ideal state for humanity. If we can be unbothered by the acts of our neighbor, then we don't spend too much time focusing on it or giving it too much attention. We really allow ourselves to enjoy our own day, our own life with more freeness and fulfillment, because what's happening outside and what someone else is doing doesn't enter our zone. We see it, we observe it, we recognize it, but then we very quickly move back onto whatever it was that we were doing. Um, so forgiving yourself is important as well. Okay. And I want to quickly just reverse the coin here as I close out, because I think this is a very important part, and we haven't touched on this in this conversation. We've been the victim, right? Up until now, we've been the victim. We're speaking from the victim's perspective, okay? And just the person who was wronged. I think the victim is not a great word. We're speaking from the perspective of the person who was done wrong to. But what if you're the wrongdoer, okay? What if you are the cheater, the stealer, the liar, the killer, the whatever the thing is? Killer's quite that's quite crazy. I hope none of you who are watching this have murdered anyone. If you are, I hope you're getting your life back on track. But that's one of the worst acts we can commit, right? So scratch that one from the record. But what if you are that individual? What if you're the wrongdoer? Okay, how do we move forward in life when we feel like we're kind of not worth anything? We feel a bit worthless because we're the person who did the bad thing, right? And maybe that person hasn't forgiven us yet, and we're trying to move forward with our life. We're trying to just get back on a path where maybe we can figure it out and do better next time. Yeah. Well, again, it goes back to what we were saying earlier. You're gonna have to start by analyzing your behavior and figuring out why you did what you did, and really digging deep. Not just surface level. Go deep. Figure out what it is internally, psychologically, which made you do that thing. Maybe a therapist can help you do that. And your motivations for doing that thing. You're going to have to really unpack that whole equation before you can forgive yourself for something that you've done. But it's important to forgive yourself, right? And I want to say this because it goes both ways, and really we're talking about getting ourselves back on track with life ultimately, especially when like we're saying, when this is a big thing that's happened. It's going to knock you off course a little bit, whether you're the person who was wronged or the person who did the wrongdoing. It's going to move your trajectory a little bit. You might be someone who's quite flippant and be like, I don't really care. But the reality is it's going to weigh on you. And ultimately, at one point, it's going to catch up to you. But what if we recognize the wrongdoing and we want to change it for ourselves? But again, first of all, analyzing it is important. Then we need to really forgive ourselves. And forgiveness is, I guess, very hard to give to yourself when you are the person who's wrong, because you just don't feel good about yourself. You don't feel good about what you've done. You've hurt someone else. You don't know if they're over the pain that you've caused them. Maybe they won't ever get over it because of what you did was so terrible. But we still have to be able to move on and to try and do better and try and make the best of our life. We can't live with the resentment of ourselves for something that we've done to someone else, because whilst it's not wrong to feel that way because you have done something bad, right? You still have to live, okay? You still have to go on day by day. And the fact that you feel that feeling, it shows that your human nature is, whilst not perfect, because none of us are perfect, it's in the right zone. You're somewhere in the right trajectory, okay? So you did the thing, you realized you were wrong, you want to make it right. Maybe you can't make it right. Maybe that person hasn't forgiven you yet, but you want to be able to move forward with your own life. So you're going to have to forgive yourself. And it's important to understand that that choice, that decision you made in the moment, it does not define you as an individual or as a person. It's just a reflection of human nature, who we all are, the things that we can all be susceptible to, right? So that's one of the first things I think you're really going to have to get around, is understanding what you did and why you did it, and then realizing and also knowing that that bad choice, that bad decision does not define you, especially if you feel like you want to move forward and do better for yourself and for others moving forward with your life, right? That bad decision is not everything, okay? In the moment you were weak, you did something you shouldn't have done, but it's important to understand that there's a condition in you that we all can be susceptible to. No one is better than you. And although you might have fallen afoul of, the marker that we look for in society as far as what constitutes a good person, someone who, is a good member of society, although you might have fallen foul of that, you are not irredeemable because of this one thing that you've done. In fact, that road to redemption is quite beautiful. It's quite a beautiful place to be because you're on the climb, you're on the ascendancy. You know that in some essence, you hit a place of rock bottom because you did something you shouldn't have done. So now we need to climb out of that well. Now we need to find our way back onto that higher plateau, that higher spiritual frequency, that higher platform that's going to allow us to be in scenarios where we can create the opposing feeling for people. Okay, you did something bad, you made someone feel bad, you did something which didn't make someone feel good. Okay, the number one thing that you want to do now that you've analyzed it, accepted that it doesn't define who you are, now you need to do the reverse. Now it's about the good things you can do. How can you be the opposing force of what you previously were? How can you be the force for good, the force for positivity, the force for creating feelings of benefit for people? Okay, that is where the new road is for you. If you have done something bad and you feel like you want to make a change for yourself, you've got to forgive yourself for what you did by analyzing it and accepting it, and then you have to go about counteracting it with good deeds, with good behaviors, with good acts, with good words. How can you put yourself in a position now where we can never listen? Everyone's slate is dirty. Some dirtier than others, but everyone's slate is dirty to a degree. Okay, and none of us will ever clean our slates. We'll never clean our slates, but the higher power says we all have a forgiveness in totality for life, for everything that we've done because of the human condition. So now it's about covering the slate with good deeds, good gestures, good practices that are going to enrich other people's lives. Be altruistic in your approach. Now, do things that have no value for you, but have great value for everyone else. That is how you're going to get yourself out of that hole you're in because of that thing you done. And maybe it's just one thing, but sometimes that one thing is so bad that it holds us there and we feel like it defines us, but it doesn't. I'm here to tell you that that bad thing you did doesn't define you. You might even have done time behind that bad thing you did, but ultimately you can be redeemed, and your redemption is largely up to you. It's largely up to you making different choices for yourself. So I'll close it again with this statement to kind of circle the square on forgiveness of self. When you can find the space to accept that you are human and flawed, it becomes easier to forgive your own transgressions, learn from them, and move forward with the intention to do better day by day. That's episode 10, forgiveness. If you got this far, great. As I say always, you don't have to like, comment, share, or subscribe. But if you think this could be of value to anyone who is holding on to resentment for themselves or for others, please share it with them so that they can, let go and be free from the chains of that situation. I will see you guys in episode 11. Who knows what that one will be about? I look forward to it.